Come here, son. All right, this is so exciting, Ewan, that after a few moments of not being able to connect and we had a few technical difficulties, we're super excited that we are here together today. So thank you for joining us all the way from Scotland and for being here with us today in such an important moment for our entire team. So thank you for that. And we're really excited to hear what you have to share with us about transition design, and knowing that transitions is what all of us are going through as leaders, as organizations, as businesses, as schools. And we can't wait to understand a little bit more about transition design. And one of the things that really caught my attention on your website, Ewan, is the fact that you mentioned it's not about what we learn, but about how we learn and how that learning happens. And that's what a Scala concept is all about. It's about the how behind the learning. So your talk definitely connects to what we believe in with regards to our 4 pillars, and a Scala concept and myself welcome you today so that we can develop this conversation on transition design.
Thank you so much for the welcome, and I'm looking forward to it. I think that for 20 years, a lot of us have been talking about the why, start with the why, with all those concentric circles. And maybe we've been asking ourselves more how we can do what we do. I think more and more people know why they're in schools doing what they do. They've got that sorted. And this crisis has maybe helped people reassure themselves that, yes, we know why we're here. Now tell us how to make this work, because we're in a really tough situation. So I'm going to try and share some of those things, and I've got some inevitable slides to help, but I don't want to stay stuck on slides. I think we'll be able to play around with some different ideas. The first thing is we are really keen on finding silver linings in our organization. We're a group that have become known the world over for our design thinking work and primarily problem finding. So finding problems, not just solving them. But that can sound quite pessimistic. Really, transition design, what we're looking at today, is something really optimistic. And it's really about action. The crisis that we've all experienced has forced us to act, and we've acted really quite quickly, maybe not perfectly, but we've had to. Now is the time that educators, leaders, people working in learning and development in companies and organizations can take some time to shape their reaction to this. And it might sound funny to say, we've got time to reshape, but really we do. Although that first frenetic period we're maybe in the middle of it still, some of us, that frenetic period of activity where myself, throwing myself into projects to try and probably keep busy and probably keep my mind off some of the big questions that I want to ask. It doesn't last forever. And that's really the point I want to begin with. And I'm going to go back to the beginning of when I started my team, NoTosh. And about a year after we started, we were invited to co-direct an election campaign. It ended up being the most successful election campaign anywhere on the planet until last year, until the Ukrainian election. We had, using digital tools in 2011, in a way even more innovative than what you might have seen with Obama's campaign a few years beforehand, we were able to turn a potential loss into something quite magnificent that opened the door for a different type of politics, I think, in Scotland, in my country. We did that by campaigning, and this was my first political campaign, but it wasn't the first campaign that I'd ever done. This is what you look like at the beginning of a campaign, and this is what you look like after you've done a few more of them. It's hard work. And I was younger, thinner, and probably less stressed, but it's a different type of work. And you always begin a campaign by looking at the tools that you have, the people you have, all the equipment that you can bring to bear. And so those yellow post-its at the end of the table, those were kind of mainstream media, expensive stuff, advertising, all those kinds of things. All the things on the orange were social media, things people could do from the ground up. And in the middle, we had those things that maybe needed a little bit more organized in the way that political parties can kind of organize people and organize events. And every day we looked at that, and we had 114 tactics. We had 100 days of campaigning. And so a tactic or two every day. We took it off in the morning, tested it, and ran it. And so every morning we would start with a meeting, and most evenings we would end the day with a meeting. And in that meeting, in what we call a war room, in schools, we sometimes call this a project nest. We would go around the table, and each person or from each department would say what they were going to attempt that day, with which tools, with which messaging, see how it all interconnects. Off we would go, do our work, and then review it. And that's a pace. It's a heady pace. It's very exciting, great fun. And it was a real honor to be part of such an amazing winning team. But it's a campaign, and it's exhausting. And there's something very important about what we are doing at the moment. What we are living now, is not a campaign. It's not a campaign for lots of reasons. First of all, there was no plan. We can't pretend that there was a plan. And even those politicians and governments who did have a plan didn't even use them. So there was no plan. Second, there is no deadline. There's no May 5th election date, which you're aiming for. And then on May 6th, you can sleep in and catch up in all those hours. There is no deadline. We don't know when this phase is going to end. So we have a question to answer there. And third, not everyone signed up for this. So we have to be nice to people. And I think that the biggest challenge that we are seeing amongst leadership teams is they are overworking themselves. They are taking on too much responsibility because they're nervous at giving too much almost to staff and overwhelming them. And of course, what we're saying is, well, yes, that's true. It is hard. It's really hard not to overwhelm people. But at the end of the day, you have people in your team who want to be involved, who want to get stuck in, who want to take ownership of projects. And so there's people want to make a difference. This is their time. So we've got these challenges of this not being a campaign. And there are 3 things that we can do to try and resolve each of them. And that's what I'm going to take you through today. It's evening time here in Edinburgh, 9:20 at night. So perhaps by the time I've finished the talk and we go into a Q&A, some darkness might have fallen around me, and we'll be able to explore that. So I'm going to share my screen again and share that some slides with you. But all the time, I want you to think about what this might mean for you in your school or your organization if you don't work for a school. So this is not a campaign, and I'm going to take you through 3 things about what to do when there is no plan, what you do when there's no deadline, and what you do when clearly not everyone in your team, not everyone around you, and maybe not even you signed up for this, and how we might be nice. So the first thing, when there's no plan, job number 1 is to listen. And listening is incredibly hard when everyone is speaking, when everyone's got an opinion. I'm going to take you to pre all this. I'm taking you to Paris, where Jane Thompson, the director there, and her board and her leadership team brought together an amazing design team with us. This design team was trying to explore what made their school unique and special to help plan their future strategy. And this that you're seeing is part of a project nest. It's the school equivalent of a war room. I think war room is difficult vocabulary to use when you're dealing with primary school children, kindergartners, elementary kids. So this Project Nest or war room is a physical place where all the data gathered from the community is placed. And of course, you need your cuckoos to have some kind of material to bring back to the nest. And so if you're a teacher, if you are a school leader, if you work in any kind of company or organization, any of you can speak to someone else just to listen. And so the key thing we would ask is people use interviews, good open-ended questions, and just listening and capturing what they say is really important. Or use tools like this. This actually was last night. With the Escola Concept team, we had 180 members of staff, colleagues, working together frenetically for 45 minutes. We explored what all those practices and new habits are that people are finding in this quite strange time. We plotted them on what they saw people doing, what people felt, what they thought, what they said. And by plotting them, we were then able to transfer many of those over into an impact matrix. So which of these new practices or emerging things that they were noticing have a particularly high impact? That's on the right hand side, and which and it's the top, sorry. And then how much do those ideas cost? So if they're very expensive, they're over to the left, and if they're cheap or free, they're over to the right. And of course, the ideas we're interested in are the ones on the right to the top, because they are low cost or free, and they potentially have a high impact on the student experience or the worker's experience. Now, something fascinating happened when we analysed this a little later on. We noticed that everything on the left was about technology or physical environment, but largely about technology. The technology was viewed as being expensive, difficult to organise, something that might trip people up. Whereas everything on the right was massively strong learning and teaching techniques and practices and incredibly innovative ideas. And the colleagues from the school were developing hundreds of these ideas, most of them free. They might require some effort, but most of them not needing cash, most of them not needing a lot of time, but certainly all of them maybe needing some thought, needing a team to make something of it. And so a team is really important. This is the design team that we had in Paris. This is a team that represents students and teachers, parents, the board, leadership team, and they went out, they used their social reach in the school to go out and talk with people and listen to what they had to say, in the same way as we did last night using a piece of technology. We hijacked professional learning events with staff to find out what teaching staff thought should be a way forward. That's what we did last night with the Escola Concept team. We did local language events. Not everyone speaks English. Some people argue that as a Scotsman, I don't really speak English either, but local language events. So if you're in Sao Paulo, it makes sense to do some of this listening and conversation in Portuguese. If you live in France, as these guys do, then do it in French. And it means that you're able to tap into the community much better. That includes parents too. So holding breakfasts, anything with food tends to bring people together. And at the moment, if you're unable to bring your community together, you can do these listening exercises online using tools like Mural, Zoom, or just the good old-fashioned telephone. And best of all, the budget for running a parent breakfast at the moment is nil, because they bring their own food. They ran a business outlook evening. This was a fantastic innovation from the school, where they brought together some of the business people that are connected with the school to tap into their expertise of what big business is looking for from graduates, which helps shape the ambition and the direction that you might take with qualifications. And at the same time, innovative teachers at the school ran sessions to show what learning can feel like. So imagine running small sessions for mums and dads as well as for their kids, to show them what blended learning feels like. What does it feel like when a kid is learning sometimes at home and sometimes in school? Most of us don't know. So let's discover it together with parents. And that will generate, I think, a great deal of empathy and understanding on the part of parents about what schools are trying to do. And obviously it will help them to have a dialogue with people about what works and doesn't work, rather than the teacher feeling that they've got the sole responsibility for all of that. And of course, lots of coffee, cake, and conversation online in project nests or on virtual project nests like the one I showed you. Those virtual project nests for us are so important. They always have been. For about 6 years, we've been using this kind of technology to run events online, partially to save the planet 5 years ago, we made the decision to travel much less. We were able to slash that travel by 43% pretty much overnight by using more and more of these kinds of virtual tools. And it feels like perhaps that's 5 or 6 years very well spent now, preparing us for the kind of work that we can help schools and other organizations do. So the second big challenge is that there was no deadline. This is not a campaign. So this doesn't finish at the summer holidays, and it doesn't just start up again in August or September or whenever your school year starts. There's no fixed date, and that creates a great deal of stress. I feel it. I'm sure you do too. So overcoming that stress is really important. And the way to do it is design your way out of it. When there is no deadline, you have to create your own deadline. And that's partially about you choosing the design brief, not letting the crisis define this brief for you. You define your own briefs. Don't let crises define it for you. That means that you have to design with intentionality. You have to know what you're trying to achieve. You have to test and check assumptions. If it's not possible, the best question you ask back is, why not? Why not is the most powerful question that anyone can ever ask. It's also sometimes the most annoying one, but it's so important because it tests people's assumptions and really makes people think about why we've always done things the way we've done it. And then do a reality check, which takes you back to point one, you're listening. So listening is being so important, helps you test assumptions in a nice, pleasant way. But listening also allows you to uncover these silver linings in the crisis, the positive points that you can start to build on, the stronger foundations than you maybe had before. It's quite possible that the foundations that you had for your idea of schooling or the workplace up until January this year were built on sand. Well, the sand just shook, and that's maybe tested some of the structures that you've built. So don't be afraid to look at what's been working during this crisis period and design something a little more concrete. This is an unfortunate example from a teacher in France who also agreed that this was not what they entered the job to do. First week back at school, they've had to put up with measures to keep kids apart. But this is not school. And if I were able to afford to, I wouldn't want to put my child into that environment. I would prefer them to be at home learning in the way that they've been learning here. Children playing in boxes, this to me feels like prison. Now, neither the person who took the photo nor I are proud of this kind of way of learning. So why would you be proud of that? Is this really the return to learning that you want to have kids? Or do you want to design something much more interesting, engaging, and let's just say it, much more fun? These kids are missing school. Let's make sure that they don't miss learning at home when they have to go back to school. So designing means really taking time to design your own brief with that intentionality, testing assumptions, and then the reality check. The reality check is asking you and your colleagues, in reality, how long will it take us to do the least possible to get the kind of impact we're looking for? Designing is a little bit like science. You might say that it's speed equals distance over time. So distance is really the weight of the project. How ambitious is the project that you've got in mind? Time is time, and speed is then how many people or how many dollars you can throw at the idea to get it done quicker. So let's say that your speed is limited because most people at the moment are looking after the pennies and pounds and dollars and the cents. And so that one's gone. We can't really change the speed. We're going to go at the speed that's humanly possible at the moment. Then you have time. And the question with time is, how much time have you got? Can you take 6 weeks? And if you can take 6 or 7 weeks, that tells you how ambitious you can be. So if you say to yourself, I'm going to give myself till October, that's a long time. And you can create quite significant projects in that period of time. So let's move on to the third point. And the third point is one of my favorite and probably most important points. And it's be a radiator. Not everyone signed up for what we are all doing at the moment. And for that, we should really be grateful that they're still with us. So be kind to people. The this idea of being a radiator comes from a chap called Keith Cook. This is Keith in action against my daughter, actually, in a training session. He is a fencer. I think, I don't know the Portuguese for it, maybe Scherma is in Italian, something like that. But this sport is, it's a funny sport. It's not football, it's not rugby, it's not one of these games that you would just find at school. It's something that the kids fall into and they end up kind of getting addicted to it, and the parents too. And Keith is a Commonwealth medal winner. He's one of the top coaches in the whole of the UK, one of the best teachers I've ever seen in action. And the way he puts it is this. He says, if you have the choice, you can be surrounded by radiators, or you can be surrounded by drains. And would you choose to stand by a radiator on a cold day, or would you choose to stand next to the drain? And I'm sure most of us know which one we'd go into. You would choose to stand by the radiator. So what does that mean in practice? It means that we need to be thoughtful of the people around us. We need to think really carefully about how we engage with them. Not everyone signed up for this, so the structures we put in place are important. Now, there are a couple of things that you could do to weigh that up. It's not just about being nice, but it's about having structures too that allow people to engage with ideas. So here's one of those potential structures. And it's a little bit similar to the structure that I used last night in a quick 45-minute session with the team at the Scholar Concept. We had a lot of people on a video call, and we used our online platform to get them sharing. And more or less, this is the kind of structure we were using. So there's your high investment, low investment. And then we talked about whether things had an impact, whether there was a need, or maybe people just have a desire, they have a want that needs satisfied. And we lay these out with a bit of color coding. So if something's cheap and it's going to have a high impact, or it's going to meet people's needs, there's a really good chance that you can get those people involved in the idea, in making it happen. So you might choose to proceed with ideas which have a really high perception of need from people, even if you personally don't think it's important, because what it does is it engages the people around you. So think of, if you're a teacher, think of those students in front of you. What's their greatest need right now? And what can you do? What ideas do you have that don't cost much? They don't cost much time, effort, or whatever. So for example, it might be going outside and sitting in a discussion circle together and sharing some stories. Just sharing stories is more than any PowerPoint or crazy innovative idea could do. You might have really innovative ideas around space design. How are we going to change our classrooms? How are we going to change our physical environment? But that's really high cost. But what about timetables? Perhaps there's a desire to spend a little bit longer with students when they're in school, rather than having them pushed like a sausage factory through these 60-minute blocks. So there, timetabling doesn't have a very high investment, but it does have a very high impact. And it needs some time and thought, which maybe makes it cost a little bit more, draws that idea towards the center, but it's still a green idea. So that's one way of looking at it. Really, you want to do those ideas first. Anything that is in that low need, low impact, low desire, and it costs a lot of money, get rid of it. It's really important to identify those projects so you can then burn them and get rid of them. And then finally, anything that's expensive but could have a high impact or meets that need, you might put off to later. Because if the free or cheap idea solves the problem that you had, then you might not have to invest all that money. And so teachers and school leadership, workers and CEOs have to work together, have to have these conversations together. And I would argue parents have to get involved in this too, to understand why certain decisions are made. We're doing this because it might solve the problem without us having to invest that. I hope that's helpful. This bottom right-hand corner, I call it the busy work zone. Anything that has a kind of low impact and doesn't cost a lot of money, you might think, well, no harm, we'll just do it. It might have an impact, but that's the busy work zone. That's where you spend hours toiling on something, creating endless things for your online classroom, PowerPoints, what have you, and then 4 kids use it. and the rest of the kids are bored by it. That's what I call busy work. It isn't having a high impact. It doesn't generate high desire. And although it's low cost, it's going to cost you your motivation. So anything that falls in the busy work zone, you should feel you take permission not to do it. And again, dialogue, conversation between leadership and people working in that environment is vital to really understand it. I think the busy work zone is really red rather than orange, because so much time can get sucked away to that. So the other thing is the people around you. Not everyone signing up to it means you've got variable levels of commitment to the cause. And so I can repeat that color coding, and you might find that ideas match up with certain people. So people with high commitment well, it might seem obvious. Of course you want to engage them. But the biggest question we've really got to ask as well is whether they have a high competence. So you can have people with high commitment, but their skills aren't there yet. High commitment and high skill, give them the project to manage and get out of their way. The biggest challenge is where people have high commitment and low competence. Well, they're trainable, so let's get them trained up. Let's tell them what they need to do and how to do it. But low commitment and some competence or variable competence, well, there's a block up here in their head. So that's where it's worthwhile thinking about how you can unpick the issues that are getting in the way of their commitment, and then they move up into that orange trainable zone. So you can help those people once you've listened to them and understood what the blockage is. Why do you want to do this, but you don't want to do that when the rest of our community feels this is important? Unfortunately, I would say that people with variable commitment, who have commitment but only on their terms, who don't really see other people's view of what might be important as mattering, and who also have high competence, well, the danger is that leadership keep those people because we feel, well, they're very skilled, we should keep them on, but they're in a bad mood with everyone else, so they're not doing what they're doing. At NoTosh, we call those guys genius jerks. They're unpredictable. But the only way that you can really work with them is give them the vision of what you're trying to achieve and let them decide about how to go about it and hope that they succeed. It can be where your disruptors are found. It can be that group of people where amazing breakthroughs come. But when you're trying to transit from a time of crisis into something fresh and new, that disruption can be less worth the cost than the benefit that they eventually bring. Any day, I would much rather have someone with high commitment and slightly shakier competence in an area, because at least we can work together and build up an idea together. So I hope that kind of framework is useful for you. And at this point, I would love to open up the questioning and give an opportunity if people have any Q&A on the YouTube chat. Maybe there are some questions that have been put in there to summarize, to try and fill in any gaps that we've got. But if you haven't got a question, if you're wanting a recap, just remember, listen to your community, design with intentionality and test all those assumptions. And then third, be a radiator, don't be a drain to other people. And generally people will tend to navigate towards you. And it's become nighttime here, and I can see for Priscilla, it has become nighttime for you as well in Sao Paulo. The sun falls early for you.
It sure does, Ewan. And thank you so much for sharing such thoughtful words with us and really provoking our thinking and stretching our thoughts in so many directions. I was here, even though we spoke previously, and even though I participated yesterday, I was here taking notes on my cell phone and taking pictures of the slides as we moved along. So for me and for my team, for sure, this has created a really high impact on our organization. So thank you for that.
That's a pleasure to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we do have a few questions that have been asked. We are so fortunate at A Scala Concept to have our own design team. And that is a blessing because our design team is able to really push our thinking forward, provoke thought inside our community and inside our internal community and external community together. And our head of design has a question that she posed for you, which is, transition design might also be seen as organizational change. And on that note, how do you see design shaping the way we lead, connect, and organize ourselves into effective teams?
Oh, it's a huge challenge. It's not an easy one. We did, I put up a little video clip from a workshop we were doing with colleagues in Ghana, in Africa. And the colleagues at Lincoln Community School in Ghana have been asking the same question, especially about the role of, you've got people with leadership in their job title, heads of department like your head of design, and that job can sometimes feel quite administrative. In fact, in North America, you guys use this term administration, and in Scotland the administration is the people in the typing, you know, who answer the phone. It's pushing paper, and all too often that job of middle leader, that head of department job, can be pushing paper, not doing kind of pedagogical leadership. And the biggest question is, are those people the people who, is it in their job description? Are they the best placed to lead projects that could affect the whole school? I don't think the answer is yes. I think that the answer to that question for whole school projects probably lies not in one person, but in several. And so we've been exploring for about 3 years now with schools how they move into a more agile way of leading projects. We started 9 years ago with a TEDx talk on problem finding and the need for agile leadership and agility in leadership. And it was really unfashionable. People didn't like the idea of not knowing what you're going to be doing 6 months away. But the idea anyone knows what's going on 6 months away is crazy anyway. So I think that maybe now people are beginning to realize 3 or 6 months ahead is more predictable. It's a bit more like a campaign for the person leading it. They know there's an end where they're going to present, you know, we've tried this and here's the result. And so you can enter into we do 3-month design cycles or sprints. 3 months is about a term in a school, so it's a nice chunk of time. You can do a lot of damage in 3 months, but you can't destroy the school. So it gives people a chance to try stuff out, fail, try again, grow, and then go to the board or the leadership team with what they've managed to do. What I would say is it should not be 9 months. 9 months is a strange period of time to organize one's life. We don't have to do it that way. So why not have projects that have one leader for 3 or 6 months, and then that leader passes the baton? Because I can guarantee, Priscilla, that in every school, every teacher knows whether they are someone who starts projects, they're the ideas person, they love getting things going. They know whether they're the perfecter, finisher, the attention to detail, who spots the thing no one else spots. And then you've just got great managers who can push a project through the doldrums. Every project has those doldrums, and they can push it over the line and get it done. In my team, I know who those people are. I know what I am, and it means that I'm never in charge of a whole project. What I know is that that's not in the culture of most schools. Most schools don't like it when they lose their consultant, for example. They say, oh, we want so-and-so. Well, you're not going to have so-and-so because that's not what they're great at. They're great at doing this, and now you're going to have this person because they're better at doing that. So potentially that changes the way you look at it. And it also means that you've got more growth opportunities for younger members of staff. And I've seen your staff, at average age 28. I mean, you need as many opportunities as possible for that young, talented team to take a project and try it, or you'll lose them long term. So this is a really good way, I think, to keep energy high and give people a rest, which is so important.
Yeah, I totally agree. You and I think the give people a rest sometimes is difficult, especially in these times, as you mentioned, where there's a lot of transition and a lot of things happening
Yeah.
at a really fast pace. And sometimes we all have to be super committed until long hours of dedication so that we can really, even though it's not a campaign, but as you mentioned in your campaign talk, really pushing it forward so that we can meet deadlines and that we can really deliver the most relevant product possible, in this case being, education and the value of learning online. But with that being said, one of the things that I really appreciated in your answer is the fact that, yes, you're absolutely right. In our school, we work in squads, and we have these squad leaders. Luciana is actually a leader of several of these projects with our squads. And one of the beauty of beauties of working at a Scala Concept is the idea that you get so many chances to risk take, to innovate, to create these amazing products that come out of nowhere. Like we are just publishing this week a well-being newsletter.
This is the thing that I've noticed, because we work with a lot of schools. The pace that you're able to deliver things that is sign that you're not a command and control organization. It's much more your squads are maybe, and I can guarantee there will be someone in your team watching this saying our squads don't have enough autonomy, because they'll always want more. They'll always want to have more slack to go off and but already that's a lot more autonomy than you would see in a more traditional school structure. So if you see very traditional school structures, particularly in elite kind of international or private schools in the US, is almost a religious barrier to being able to think in that way, because people are worried about losing face or losing their fiefdom. There isn't, that's maybe one point where there isn't much time to think about that, because even without the crisis, people want that. And your new generation of 20-something teachers, they're not going to stand up for being told what to do. And if they do, I wouldn't even want them in my school. I want entrepreneurs who can do amazing things for themselves.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that that's exactly why working at Concept, again, is so different, because you have to be a thinker, you have to be a doer, you have to want to get your hands dirty, you have to want to be leading projects. Because if you're going to wait until everything's handed to you, you're definitely in the wrong school, right? Because we're a project-based learning school, really pushing innovation and that startup mentality. So it's dangerous sometimes when Luciana and I get together, but that's a whole nother conversation. But we have some other questions that have come up. And one of them is also from a member of our design team. Her name is Anya. She's from Germany, and she mentions the concept experience is one of the mantras that guide our thinking when being on campus. Living in a reality where most of our connections happen digitally, we many times ask ourselves how we create moments that make the experience a concept experience. In your point of view, what makes an online experience innovative, individualized, and involving?
I mean, she mentioned there a really important thing, which is what makes it a fill in the blank experience. So most schools struggle with that. I think that we've, for 4 or 5 years now, I'm quite proud of the reputation that we've won for helping reframe, rearticulate mission and core values in organizations. I struggle saying those words because for years I just found them useless. Plastic placards, plastic things on the wall, posters on the wall that people could tell you the language of the mission, but they weren't living it. So they didn't resonate with them. It was full of jargon. It had the same platitudes from one school to the other. And so I said, look, to our team, I said, we could do better. And we have the most amazing associate creative director, Jerry Farrell, on our team. He works exclusively with us on school projects. He is a Cannes Lion d'Or winning copywriter. He's one of the most successful ad guys on the planet, one of the most respected copywriters on the planet. And he works with us. It's a real honor. And when we get our hands on a mission in a school, we can do some magic, but not just because he's amazing at his job, because our first job is listening to the community. So we, just as you saw, we established that design team. We really listen to what makes the community tick, using the design team to go out deep into the community for 6 or 7 weeks. And when they bring all that data back and we synthesize it, every time, although you see a lot of the same, obviously, because kids are kids, teachers are teachers, there's always something quite unique about a community. And when you nail that language in the mission or in the core values or in both, then you get something. When you launch it, I always remember launching the American School of Warsaw's core values after we did that. to 170 staff. It was the last day of summer term. The kids had gone off on holiday. The kids were the teachers were stuck in school for a day of professional learning, and this was the first thing up. It was everything you could imagine being stacked against you was stacked against you. So we launched with Daniel, this lovely kid who had been in the design team. He helped to launch these core values with his staff, and we had tears of delight, I should say. We had one person who there's always one who didn't like it, who said, well, I've been here for years and I don't think that sums up. But we had 99.9% of other people saying, this sums us up. This is who we are. Now, in a time of crisis, we've seen on Twitter, through thanks to Twitter, that schools like the International School of Beijing, where we reframe the mission, are living online with joyful learning in the same ways they aspire to have joyful learning in school. Arguably, the learning is harder to be joyful in school when you've got your kids all spaced out and everyone's wearing masks and there's perspex everywhere. But that mission, that core purpose is what matters. So what I would say is that if you're in a school where the core purpose is not clear, this is the time to reestablish it, to reassert what it is, to reframe it and put it in language a 6-year-old understands. And if a 6-year-old can get it, then everyone else can get it. And then live by it. And I think the rest is down to the ingenuity, the talent, the skills of your teams. Trust them to get on with a good job, knowing that that's our North Star. That's how we do it here. That's the way of doing things.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that, Ewan. That was very, very helpful. And when we think about, when we think about joy it was our theme for last year. Every year we have a theme.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's a surprise.
Yeah. Last year we actually used the book Joyful by Ingrid Fatelli. She was one of the heads at IDEO, and she wrote this phenomenal book talking about what brings joy in the lives of people. So we used that as one of our themes for the 2019 school year, along with Mary Poppins was also part of our theme. And then this year it's we use The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind as our theme. So this year we started off the year with harnessing your potential. And how ironic, right? After all of this happens, how we've had to harness all of our potentials to come together as a really strong community of learners. So interesting connections. And we've been talking about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's not, oh no, it's not ironic. I think that's the thing, that it's, if you have a designful mind, if you design things, nothing's ironic because you are constantly looking for things out there. You can't go for a walk without spotting something that will be useful to bring back. That's why we call it a project nest, because we're all cuckoos stealing other people's ideas, stealing other people's twigs, bringing it back to the nest and making something hopefully better from it and something new that we can share back with other people. And I think that it's not ironic and it's not lucky. Designers constantly bring all that stuff together, and that's where we have crazy bookshelves with full of newspaper cuttings, old school newspaper cuttings. There's another bookshelf there full of things that I've yet to read that looked interesting at the time that might fit into a project. Designers are mavens of cool stuff that might be useful one day.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. When we play around with each other, that when you can leave concept, right? Like over the weekend or late at night, but concept never leaves you. So it's always there, and you're going for a walk and you're at the beach and you're, staring up at the sky, and something, sparks an idea or sparks a curiosity. Today, some of us got to watch the Harvard online graduation ceremony. And as we were watching the online graduation ceremony for Harvard, we were texting each other about all these ideas that came up. So there was, one of the speakers who talked about keys and, finding these keys that unlocked, all these different doors for him. So we were writing to each other and saying, okay, where can we use keys and this analogy and that analogy? And, how Harvard gives you, once you move into your dorm, you get your key says everyone has the name of all the alumni who once slept in your room, in your dorm room. So that is so phenomenal. So I texted Luciana and I said, where can we use this? This is something that we need to keep in mind. And so I think that's exactly it. It's always kind of sparking those ideas and letting those ideas make connections, right?
I'd
And
also say get out of education a little bit as well. I think that our job, the reason that why would anyone ask someone from outside of school to go into a school? Well, it's because we bring other experiences, and a third of our work is not in schools. A third of our work is with engineering companies and media firms. It helps you see things in a different way. So it also helps challenge assumptions, because genuinely we say, why on earth do you do it that way? Have you never thought about doing it that way? So next week, we're going to host an online session just looking at timetabling. And really, it could be really boring or it could be fascinating. We'll find out. But looking at time in school, and if you can only have 12 kids in a room that serves 30, then how are you going to divide and conquer? How are you going to make the most of your school? So those kinds of discussions don't get solved just by looking at education or just copying another school. And there's a bias that can come in when you start to copy other schools. There are certain schools in California that everyone seems to have visited. They're not the best schools, I can tell you that much. But we all do that, we copy. Why not go to your local school and see what they're doing? And there's probably something magical that you can lift. Or go to your local store even, and just go on a learning walk around your store.
I think these learning walks are so powerful as well. They connect to the Out of Eden Learn project that comes out of Project Zero. They talk about those learning walks and and Sherry Tishman and her work, right, and her research is all about that. So that's phenomenal as well. Great, great insights to think about and to ponder on. And the timetable question is such a fascinating conversation for those of us who really truly love education. So I can't wait to maybe be a part of that conversation or to learn from the results of that conversation. So thank you.
We'll be highlighting it for sure. And it will be a teach meet. So it's turn up, bring your stories, and you'll meet teachers from all over the world, but probably quite particularly from Scotland, because it's a pressing issue here as we think about returning to school in August, September.
That's interesting. We're a no bell school. So we have no bells in our school. Apple is is what keeps track of our time. Cupertino time is the concept time. So we have no bells, and that's how we operate a school of 620 people in Sao Paulo, 620 students, and in Ribeirão and Salvador, a little less, but no bells throughout the building. So that's also, some thought that we put into how we wanted to operate our timetables, and think about the division of time. But anyway, Ewan, I think we could stay here and talk to you all night long, but I know it's getting late for you, and it's already 6 o'clock for us. So unfortunately, we have to part ways.
It's been a pleasure.
We cannot wait to have you again with us. We've now learned that there's a faster route from Brazil to Scotland. And it does not involve a plane ticket in an airport. So now that we've learned that, we are going to be able to take advantage of that a lot more, and to be with you more times.
We have all those crazy social media that we are apparently spending 50% more time on now than we've ever spent on them before. So if you follow us, then we're publishing lots of new ideas. We try to give away as much as possible so people can just have a go themselves. All we ask is you share your stories back with us when you have hopefully lots of positive stories to tell. So you can find NoTosh, which is our larger team, everywhere. And of course, we have an amazing team. This kind of work you can't do on your own. You have to do this kind of work together in a team. And so the first thing, as a next step I would give everybody, is think about who you want to create an alliance with, around what need or potential impact you think you can have, and then do something from this weekend or from Monday that can have an impact before the end of the academic year. And I think that just getting a win like that under your belt before you hit summer can do the world of good for people. So that's my parting shot. Have a go, achieve something, and then tell the world what you managed to do, even if it screwed up, even if it didn't quite work out the first time.
That's fantastic. Learning is messy. And if you don't mess up, for sure you're not learning. So thank you so much, Ewan. And thank you all of our concept team and all of our audience that has been with us. We cannot wait to welcome you tomorrow again. We have another live with our morning bites with such a strong name in Brazilian education, Brazilian psychology and psychopedagogy. So we can't wait to have you join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Here on our concept channel on YouTube. So thank you, Ewan, and good night to everybody.